Are the Oklahoma Sooners already overrated?
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to Locked On Sooners, and thank you for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers out there. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. He's Jay Smith of Unfair Sports. I'm John Williams of Sooners Wire, and welcome to Locked On Sooners. The Oklahoma Sooners are in a early top 25 for 2025. On3 Sports, Ari Wasserman and Andy Staples put the Oklahoma Sooners at number 18. And Jay, I'm going to say it. That's way too high. I don't think Oklahoma should be considered a top 25 team by any stretch of any imagination going into the 2025 season.
I'm the complete opposite. I think it's the perfect spot for Oklahoma, right around 20, roughly where we are every single year. Now they need to prove to everybody that they deserve to be a little bit higher by actually winning some games. And it's funny because Paul Feinbaum talked about it last week on his show that Oklahoma has a very good chance of going undefeated headed into the Red River if they show up on the offensive side of the ball, because that's where the problem lies, John. Our problem has been we haven't had a competent offense in a season, which has been really weird to say that we haven't had an offense, but we had a defense. And the good thing is even though we lost our fearless leader in Danny Stutzman, the leader of the Stutzman Army, and, you lose them Billy Bowman as well, Dejon Terry in the middle, you're bringing back the majority of the defense, and you're getting back some guys that we lost throughout the season. And so, to me, as long as Kobe McKenzie can show that he has enough power to fill the same gaps that Danny Stutzman did, and Kip Lewis can continue to fly around at linebacker, and Peyton Bowen shows us that he's a 5-star freestyler, I think the defense has a chance of getting better, especially if we have a competent offense.
Well, let me tell you why I feel like Oklahoma being in anybody's top 25 is a little bit of a stretch. You went 6-7. You had a bad offense. You're turning over a lot of your offense. You're relying on some unknowns at wide receiver. You're expecting a big jump at quarterback from John Mateer. Do I think they could be a top 25 team at some point during the 2025 regular season? Absolutely. I think they're going to have the talent. I think they're going to start the season really, really strong. I think at worst, they'll start the season 4-1. I get everybody really loves Auburn going into this season. And I get that everybody's going to be expecting a bounce back from Michigan this season. I say everybody loves Auburn. You go look at On3's top 25, and where do they have the Auburn Tigers? At number 11. So yeah, a lot of people love Auburn. I am at this point, even though I feel optimistic about what Oklahoma is going to be capable of in this season, I'm going to be riding this prove it to me all year long, because I had high expectations for this team coming into 2024. I believed that they were going to be a good team. They had a good defense. Yes, the injuries really hurt them. Mm-hmm. At the same time, decision-making by your head coach hiring Seth Luttrell, decision-making by Seth Luttrell as your offensive coordinator, decision-making by your quarterback, the offensive line still not really coming together. Yes, also battled injuries, but injuries are a part of the game, and you've got to have answers for it. And Oklahoma cannot afford another season where they're battling injuries on the offensive side of the ball. John Mateer is a really good quarterback. I think he's going to have a chance to make a big time impact in the SEC in 2025. But if he doesn't get any help around him, it's going to be a struggle bus again for the offense. So listen, I think that they can be good. And I know a lot of Oklahoma fans are going to label me a hater going into 2025, and that's fine. At the same time, I want to see them prove it. I want to see them prove it out on the field. So if they're not in any of the top 25s, whether it's the coaches, the AP, On3s, ESPNs, whatever it is, I'm fine by that. I want to see them go show that they are an actual top 25 team on the football field.
Well, we'll get to see it more in depth now that the season's over, once Bill Connelly and ESPN team put together the returning production for next season. That, to me, will be a good telltale sign of what things will look like for this squad. But to your point, that's not being a hater. You're being a realist, which I understand that.
There's a weird place for me to be.
Fair. But at the same time, I can see with both, because of the way the Oklahoma Sooners played last season, you have a reason to have a little bit of cautious optimism about the team. I totally get that. My side of it is a little bit more on the optimistic side, because we're bringing in a dude at quarterback that put up more production than our entire offense did last year. Then at the same time, you mentioned we've got questions at wide receiver. Totally get that. But the difference at the offensive line this season going in that we did not have last season is we had a small group of veterans and a whole bunch of young dudes behind them. Now we're coming in with old veterans and seasoned veterans to go along with a couple of freshman tackles that both of I have an affinity for, that we feel like could probably walk in and take a job. That to me changes it, because as much as I enjoyed the 2024 offensive line class, I didn't really see anybody in that class that I felt like was ready to play as soon as the fall hit. Now, Eddie Pierre-Louis could have been ready immediately, but he ran track in the spring and couldn't come into for spring workouts. To me, that kind of set him back to why you really couldn't see him until later in the season. But this one, I think with Fogier as well as Fasusi, they could walk in and take jobs today. I think that they're just that talented. So for me, what Oklahoma has in comparison and what Brent Venables has to work with now, a quarterback with his offensive coordinator who has been in the same system together for 2 years. That's huge to me. I think that that's really the biggest game changer, because now your quarterback, similar to what Dylan Gabriel did when he first got here with Jeff Lebby, he's able to teach everybody the system and he's able to guide them. And he's known already. I mean, I've been seeing it all over the social medias as some of the winter workouts have been leaking, that dude's a leader, that he is one of those dudes that is pointing stuff out. He's making people work. He busts his butt, and he has some pretty nice speed as far as shuttle time. So to me, John, where I come on the opposite side is not that I don't think they should they should be ranked. I don't mind us being around here because it reminds me of like year 1 and year 2, because we're now trying to get things figured out. We got a new OC. I feel like we have an opportunity to prove everybody wrong. So I'm hoping that we can stick it out, but you're right. When I see this Auburn up there at like number 11, I think that's preposterous, because I'm trying to figure out what production they're bringing a quarterback to make them really feel confident there.
And if I'm not mistaken, they had some turnover at wide receiver there as well. Like they lost.
Yeah, well, they brought in Eric Singleton Jr. from Georgia Tech, which is a big one, and then they still got Cam Coleman. So I guess honestly, it's really your 2. But then you've got Jackson Arnold fighting with Ashton Daniels as well as Deuce Knight. That's kind of a smorgasbord of guys with. I don't think Ashton's going to win the job, but I don't know if I want Jackson Arnold starting right now.
And listen, I love me some Jackson Arnold. I think he's going to be a good player still. But you go from Peyton Thorne, who had issues with turnovers, to Jackson Arnold, who had issues with turnovers. And I'm not buying Auburn. But here's the thing, Jay. What team are you buying for 2025? Because you look at the list, and who doesn't have questions? I mean, it's a top 10 that's full of them. Texas is at number 1. And I get it. We are so hype about Arch Manning. And I'm gonna sit here and say Texas will be good, but how much are they losing from this team? They're losing a bunch off of that team that went to the playoff in back-to-back years.
It's that offensive line is what thing that's going to hurt Texas to me. And that's because they're losing a lot of the. They brought back all those starters this year, which to me was what I was when I was explaining to people about how I felt Texas would produce is. The question may be at wide receiver because they're all new people, but they got that offensive line and a quarterback. That's perfect for a Steve Sarkisian offense. That's all you need. Mm-hmm. But now that line is gone and you're bringing in more younger players up, I pump the brakes of caution to see what Arch Manning can. Now, Arch Manning could probably figure it out, and Kyle Flood does a fantastic job of, coaching there on the offensive line. But if there's anything that I'm hesitant with them is, I want to see what this offensive line gels to be.
Yeah, I think it's just one of those years where you look at it and, I mean, it looks pretty wide open. To me, there's not a definitive front runner going into the season. And there's like this year, I felt like you could say Georgia, Ohio State, Texas. There was a number of teams, Alabama, that you felt good about going into the season and you felt strong about their potential. And this year, going into 2025, man, I feel like you could toss a bunch of balls up into the air, and by the end of the thing, shoot, a Big 12 team could be sitting there at number 1 at the end of the year. It seems like it's one of those years where anything could happen.
I guess the question I got to ask,
parity across the league.
I'm curious to what Notre Dame's going to do as far as quarterback out of the portal, because I think Riley Leonard had his more years, right? Isn't he?
No,
done?
I think he's done, and the portal market is going to be pretty much gone. The quarterback market is going to be pretty much done at this point, unless somebody enters in the spring.
Yeah, I think that they're going to have to hit some spring portaling, unless they've got somebody in the chamber that they feel comfortable with. I have to look at their roster,
and unless they've already made some moves during the playoff behind the scenes to try and figure that out. Hey, we got some mailbag questions we're going to answer for you here coming up, including who's going to be the biggest portal addition aside from John Mateer, coming up next here on Locked On Sooners. And today's episode is brought to you by by FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keeps every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs, FanDuel has you covered. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thanks for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers out there. Tune in and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. So hit that subscribe button and that notification bell to let you know when new episodes drop. Our first question in today's mailbag segment comes from Charles Starver 2744 over on YouTube. He says, besides John Mateer, what transfer is going to be the biggest blessing for Oklahoma, Jay?
To me, it's Kendall Daniels. State guy from Beggs, Oklahoma, played at Oklahoma State, was a freshman All-American, with freshman player of the year in the Big 12. And he did all of that underneath the tutelage of one defensive coordinator that's currently at Ohio State. And to me, I think that he's going to be one of those plug-and-play guys that can actually step up and help immediately. We talk about Danny Stutzman being gone. And when you lose a player like that, and then Deshaun McCullough, which was one of the players it hurt me that we lost, because I understood why he had to go, because there really wasn't much of a place, especially because he was dealing with so many injuries. Mm-hmm. And we've seen so much growth out of Kobe McKenzie as well as Kip Lewis and Samuel Masigo. It's gotten to the point where it's like, where do we put Deshaun? He wasn't a cheetah. We don't really need him at edge with R. Mason Thomas playing the way he was playing. So where do you need help? To me, Kendall Daniels is probably that guy. He's going to be able to come in. He's experienced with getting tackles. He's gotten pressure on quarterbacks. He can blitz. He can play in coverage. We've seen him do some good stuff in coverage. Now we've got to do is work on his discipline, his eye discipline, and get him out there to wrap up on those tackles. And man, I think he can be the next big-time linebacker / cheetah to player. He may be the Isaiah Simmons if he goes out there and busts his butt.
Yeah, I think there's a real chance that he could be a huge, impactful player for the Sooners this next year, because he's got all the tools to be really, really good. Agreed. It's just a matter of, can he put it all together in year one in this Brent Venables defense, this, Zach Alley, the potential defense that Oklahoma runs this next year. Will he be able to put all the pieces, mesh well with the team, play good team defense, and then put that effort out? I'm going with Derek Simmons, the offensive tackle addition. I think he's a plug-and-play starter at tackle. I know people are going to look at where he came from and say, hey, John, pump the brakes a little bit. He's got to go earn a job. Nothing's guaranteed for him. But let's just run down the list of teams that were trying to get this kid to come play for him or play for them. I mean, you had Virginia Tech. You had Florida State. You had Oklahoma. You had Texas Tech, Kentucky, Wake Forest, Virginia, Kansas State, Georgia Tech, Michigan State, UCF, Cal, Duke. I mean, NC State, Houston, Pitt. Now, this isn't a ton of SEC teams, but you've got some good programs in there, like a Florida State. You've got Georgia Tech, who had a really good year this year. They believe in the tools that he's got and the ability that he can be a big-time player. In 2 games against big-time competition over the last couple of years, NC State and against Arkansas, he only allowed a total of 4 pressures in those 2 games. So I think they're getting a guy that's got an upward trajectory that can start for them at right tackle at the very least and just help solidify the offensive line a little bit. So, and which is something that you need. You need a veteran presence out there at right tackle that's going to help them have a much better year and much more consistency along the offensive line.
No, yeah, I totally agree with that, especially because he's bringing in so many snaps, 612 snaps with 0 sacks allowed and 11 total pressures allowed coming in is huge. Because that's the one thing that's most important is that bringing in experience. You only lose 51 snaps out of Gary and Hatchett. You lose 164 out of Joshua Bates. And every other offensive lineman didn't get you in the stats outside of that. But you bring in Derek Simmons at 600 snaps, as well as Luke Baklinko at 646. I think Simmons does have an opportunity to be one of those guys that can walk in and take the job on the spot. I agree with you. He's one that's going to push for time on the field, and that's going to make both the Jake and Jacob have to figure things out, get themselves going. Also need them to be healthy. That's the other thing. And that's kind of why I was talking about in the last segment. The good thing is you're bringing in bodies to help with all the injured bodies we've been dealing with, experienced bodies. Now, you're right. There's no guarantee in starting here. You're not going to be handed a job. While at the same time, the one good thing is that you add him with the young pups right behind him, Isaiah Autry-Den, who's gotten some game time. Daniel Akinkumi, he'll be able to start getting some time now. Logan Howland, who played pretty solid when he was healthy. You're adding him. You're going to see that's the good thing about the offensive line. We're getting a lot of players. Bill Beatonbow's got a lot of players that have actually got some experience and be busting their butts. So I like that one too. I think he's going to be a major contributor this season, even if he's just a swing tackle.
Which wide receiver do you think is going to make the biggest impact of the transfer portal additions? Remember, Giovanni Gibson, Keontez Lewis, Josiah Martin, and Isaiah Satania.
Man, so I've been in between Satania and Giovanni Gibson, to be honest, just because of the size and the speed that I've seen out of Gibson and hitting those routes and getting open. He's really good at hitting him on a go or a deep post. But Satania, you get him in space, he's going to make some people miss. And I think that those are the two, to me, that's going to probably be the most impactful, especially Giovanni Gibson. I think just leveraging his size is going to be fun for what we know John Mateer likes to do. He gets rid of the ball very fast. So it's all about getting off the line quickly and getting to your spot. I think Gibson's going to be the one that's going to be able to do it just because of his size. To be able to just jump, do a bunch of jump balls. But I'm not gonna rule out Lewis or Satania, as they're going to be playing along with Deion Burks. Man, there's a lot of opportunity at wide receiver, which I'm really excited about.
Now, here's a kind of off the wall question for you. Who would you take, Marvin Jones in sacks or Giovanni Gibson in touchdowns?
Ooh. I'm thinking he'll do Giovanni in touchdowns. Okay. I think he'll get him beat by a couple. Let's go with that. That's a good question, because when you think about it, because Marvin Jones is going to be definitely battling with R. Mason Thomas about who's going to get all those sacks, as well as Danny Okoye, which we expect to see more playing time, and PJ Adebawore. Yeah. Give me I'm gonna take Gibson. Who you picking?
Yeah, I'll go with Marvin Jones. I think Marvin Jones Jr., he's just up for a big time breakout. And with R. Mason Thomas on the other side of the defensive line, creating pressure and taking up so much of the attention from opposing offensive coordinators, and what you got in the middle with Jaden Jackson, Dominic Williams, Grayson Halt, and David Stone, my man Marvin Jones Jr. is going to have a chance, dude. He's going to have a chance to have a breakout. Now I'm thinking like 5 or 6 sacks, and maybe close to 12 to 15 tackles for loss. But I think if he can get to 6-7 sacks, while R. Mason Thomas has 8 to 10, and you get more from your interior, you're cooking with fire, man, or cooking with gas.
Oh, yeah.
That's the saying. But I think that's going to be an interesting battle. And I know that's kind of an off the wall question. What do you all think? Do you think it's going to be Giovanni Gibson has more touchdowns than Marvin Jones Jr. has sacks? Let us know in the comments what you think is going to happen there, because it's going to be fascinating, because we're going to need these transfer portal additions to have big time production for Oklahoma if they want to get to the college football playoff or be in SEC title contention. And speaking of titles, we watched a fantastic national championship game on Tuesday night. We have some takeaways from that. Saw some big time portal additions make some big time plays for the Ohio State Buckeyes. We'll discuss coming up next here on Locked On Sooners.
This message is brought to you by Prize Picks, the place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings, Prize Picks has changed the game in daily fantasy sports. Whether it's the playoffs or regular season, Prize Picks has made it easier than ever to win big while enjoying all the football action. Now that it's playoff time, there's no better way to get into action with Prize Picks. Here's how it works. You simply pick more or less on at least 2 players, and if your pick hits, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. Yes, that's right. 1,000 times your money just by making a few simple clicks. So for me, got a couple of these hot takes on the season, but this week on Prize Picks, I'm looking at Jaden Daniels more on his 225.5 passing yards. Feels like a definite win there. Jalen Hurts, after that knee situation, I'm going to go with less than 31.5 rushing yards. And maybe Saquon Barkley would score more touchdowns at more than half a rush plus receiving touchdown combined. And it's very easy to play. All you got to do is make your picks. Plus, with Prize Picks Flex Play, you can still double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. And with the app, you get your winnings fast, sometimes in less than 15 minutes. So, ready to run your game this football season? Download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 just for playing. Don't wait. Take your game to the next level with Prize Picks. Prize Picks. Run your game.
Thanks again for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers out there. Tune in and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. So hit that subscribe button and that notification bell to let you know when new episodes drop. Go check out Jay Stevens over on Locked On Buckeyes to get all your post-game reaction over there as well. He's going to have great content for you all week long here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, Jay, it was a good game. I was excited about this game. Ohio State, Notre Dame, a physical contest with 2 good defenses, 2 good offensive lines, and I thought 2 quarterbacks that played with a lot of toughness. What was one of your biggest takeaways from this game, Jay?
It was the physicality of the game. You know, watching it, and the game starts off with a 9-minute and 45-second drive by Notre Dame of just punching them in the mouth. Punch, 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 touchdown, right? Then you followed up with Ohio State doing the exact same thing. 6-minute drive. Punch, 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 boom. Touchdown. So when I looked at this game, John, I'm looking at this like, okay, we're going to get a whole bunch of physicality. I mean, this game's going to last maybe 2.5 hours. This is going to be a short game because the clock did not stop running the entire time. But then Ohio State started to impose their will. They went ahead and got them to punt, and then they started taking over. And I was at first thinking, okay, I see you, Notre Dame. You took a piece out of the Michigan book, and you went out there and just punched him in the mouth. And Ohio State had to respond and say, no. I'm going to call up NIU, who they consider them your daddy, after last season, after that game this year, and they did the exact same thing back. It just got super physical the entire time, which I thoroughly enjoyed. But then, of course, it slowed down in the second half with Notre Dame making some, to me, questionable decisions on their drives. But they showed fight, and that was what's most important. We were talking about it, via text, before we got going. Like, we can probably start going ahead and record some stuff. We don't really need to watch this game, do we? And at the same time, I was like, I didn't think so. Yeah, I was wrong. It started to get good. And so just closing it out good. I wish that Notre Dame would have made the decision not to kick a field goal. You probably should have went for it, but you also probably shouldn't have went for it on your own 33 at the start of the half. But their defense did show up. But overall, it was a good game. It was a good It was a good heavyweight fight, it felt like. There were punches, counter punches. It looked like the champ was gonna, or one of the contenders was gonna be down real quick. He gets off the ropes and starts fighting back, and then he finally gets the knockout punch on a 56-yard deep ball that basically ended the game.
Yeah, and just before that, Chris Fowler mentions Jeremiah Smith, no touches in the second half, and it comes up with the game sealing
Jinx!
basically. Yeah,
you owe me a soda.
It's fascinating. It's a game won in the trenches. We know this, right? We've talked about it since Oklahoma went to the SEC, the need to get better in the trenches. We saw on the defensive line this year for Oklahoma, they were much better in the trenches, and they could hold up and they could hang with a lot of these teams. Offensive line got a lot of work to do. You watch these two teams play, you watch the college football playoff, and you can see that Oklahoma's offensive line, as it was constructed in 2024, is a far cry from what you got to have in order to contend and compete in the national title game. Because these two offensive lines, man, they were punishing. They created good running lanes. Will Howard had a ton of time. A lot of the times he dropped back to pass. And Notre Dame's offensive line, I felt like was doing okay against what is a great Ohio State defensive front. And Riley Leonard sometimes it was just coverage sacks, especially there in the second half. I mean, Ohio State was dropping guys into coverage and just rushing forward, and they were able still to get home because the coverage on the back end was good enough. And listen, again, credit to Marcus Freeman and his staff for keeping their team fighting and just making it simple. Like, hey, go get the next score, go get that next 2-point conversion. I think after they made it 31-15, you could see Marcus Freeman mouthing, that's one. Like, hey, we got that one. Now we go get the next one. And so listen, credit to that team. They fought, but Ohio State, man, they showed that you recruit well and develop your talent and then make a few key portal additions, Will Howard, Quinshon Judkins, and you can go on a run. It doesn't have to be all NIL. You've got to be a player because what did they spend? Like $20 million in NIL.
They spent $20 million. This is a $20 million roster that ended up winning a national championship. Now it tells you you're probably going to have to spend close to that if you want to really get the right ones. But to your point, it's about development.
Key players were recruits.
Yeah. Especially if you're talking about the offensive line. Like you made great mention of that. Remember, they lost their All-American left tackle who ended up being down for the season earlier in the year. They lost their All-American center who went down early in this, a little bit later in the season. They had to move their left guard out to left tackle, and he actually improved their offensive line because the offensive line was struggling up into the Oregon game. So they had so much shuffling they had to do on the offensive line due to all of these injuries, and boom. It just didn't feel like they had that because the continuity came in very quickly. Now, granted, they didn't lose a lot of players, but they did lose two critical ones, but they were able to shuffle people around. So similar to, as you mentioned about Oklahoma, they're going to have to get those players more experience. Bill Beatonbow's going to have to, which is the one thing that he's infamous for, is teaching them every single position on the line just in case they need to play multiple ones. He's got these guys in a little bit longer now. That extra year of working with them, I think, will make a difference. But Oklahoma's going to have to make sure that line's ready to continue to play just like they played against Alabama. That's the game they're going to have to show week in and week out. Heck, similar to even the Missouri game, they got to show up just like that week in and week out because the one thing that I recognize most out of this game that initially I was like, okay, this is probably what's going to happen and what Oklahoma should be paying attention to is, because it was so physical, it felt like it was going to be more of a defensive game initially than what we ended up getting. As the first half started happening and Ohio State started taking over, I'm like, oh man, I don't think Notre Dame's ready for this game. They look like they're tired. It looked like they just couldn't handle. They were moving furniture the entire time. That's all you saw Ohio State doing. They was picking up chairs and couches and just slide them to the side. Mm-hmm. But at some point, Notre Dame started to get that weight back underneath them, and they started to push back. But, yeah, it came a little bit later. But at the same time, again, these questionable decisions of going for it on fourth down at the beginning of the second quarter. What's this, 4 minutes into the quarter, you go for it on your own 33? Nah, bro, you punt that ball.
Yeah.
Live to fight another day. Luckily, you only gave up a field goal, which a testament to your defense, but you shouldn't put that much pressure on your defense like that.
Yeah, it's that one. It's kicking the field, going for the field goal. when you're at like the 10 or 11-yard line. Listen,
Yeah.
it's going to be tough to get in there when it's 4th and goal from the 10 or the
That's
11, but being down 13 versus being down 16, it's not that big of a difference. And you get to play the field position battle a little bit better. And you doink the kick anyway, which never trust college kickers to kick a field goal. But the other thing I kind of take away from this is what we saw from Will Howard and Ryan Day. Ryan Day, he schemed up easy completions in this offense. You saw a lot of flat stuff where it was like quick drop out to the flat, let your receivers make a play.
Yeah.
And you saw Will Howard challenging the cornerbacks, letting his guys go make a play, throwing to the receivers, even if they were covered, and just trying to see if his guy could go win a play. And that's what you got to have from your quarterback. You got to have a little bit of balance, right? You got to have your offensive coordinator willing to draw some stuff up that's going to create some easy completions for you. And you've got to have a quarterback that's willing to throw into coverage sometimes and willing to take some chances, willing to throw to a covered receiver and just hope that his guy can make the play. That's what you got to have. And you got to have some wide receivers on the field to go make those plays.
Yeah, shout out to Chip Kelly on one of the play designs that he did too, which was pretty fascinating. It looked like it was a play that he missed. It was against his game against Alabama. The touchdown pass, he threw it to was it Jeremiah Smith? Yeah. The short pass and the flats. Well, that was the exact play that Alabama did to Ohio State in the playoffs as well, which was I think it's a championship game in 2020, which was funny because Coach Dan Casey, who does a lot of plays and stuff on the X-Bird or whatnot, he showed that off. He pointed out, he's like, Chip Kelly is diabolical for this. It's hilarious because it literally is word for word, bar for bar. It's the exact same play. And I saw it, I'm like, oh, that's a pretty intriguing way of looking at that. And then of course he posts the play underneath. I'm like, oh man, opposite side of the field, but the exact same design. Yeah. So they basically got themselves a little revenge on Alabama by pulling that play on Notre Dame. So
that's what I want to see from my offensive coordinator. Like Oklahoma's
creativity
struggled so much this year, but yet they seemed very reluctant, almost at a fault, or definitely to a fault, to do some simple things for their quarterbacks to get into a rhythm. These flat concepts, these swing pass concepts, we didn't see a ton of them.
Nope.
And it was, I hate throwing behind the line of scrimmage. I really do. Generally speaking, I hate it. But when your offense can't do anything else and your quarterback is struggling with his confidence and he's having a hard time pushing the ball down the field, you got to find some way to create offense. Agreed. And that's getting the ball into the flats and letting your guys make plays. And Oklahoma's offensive coordinators in 2024 were unwilling and reluctant to do that. They wanted to throw more tight end passes than they wanted to throw some stuff to the flat, either for the running backs or for the wide receivers to make some plays. Hopefully, Ben Arbuckle is not going to be so maddening, and he's going to have some stuff in his offense that's going to be easy for John Mateer. Also, that John Mateer is going to challenge some dudes. He's going to throw some guys open. He's going to let his wide receivers get out there and make some plays. Anyway,
agree.
We'll have more to say about the national title game, what Oklahoma has to do to get there this week here on Locked On Sooners. So make sure you're tuned in, subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. So subscribe to the show wherever you do that. Follow Jay at Unfair Sports. Go check out his channel, Unfair Sports, over on YouTube. You can follow me at John9Williams and check out my work over at SoonersWire.com. You can follow the show on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Pinterest, Threads, wherever you like your social media, at Locked On Sooners. But until next time, he's Jay Smith. I'm John Williams. We'll talk to you then. Boomer.
Sooner.